All right, everybody, welcome aboard here to the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you, and we have a show that I don't think any one of us ever thought we would end up doing right now. And that, of course, involving the issue and the situation going on right now with the coronavirus, as it has a deadly virus, obviously, that is taking its toll on many, many lives across not only the United States, but across the world. Many people have lost their lives because of this disease. And as a result, the world has basically stopped. The entire planet has basically stopped because of it. And now, no more sporting events until further notice. The NBA canceled or suspended their season, I should say, until further notice. It doesn't sound like we're going to get into this in a second. It doesn't sound like we're going to have a tournament for the NCAA at all after the Power 5 conferences canceled their conference tournaments. Major League Baseball is now on at least a two-way hiatus, maybe even longer for that matter, and the NHL also suspending their season until further notice. So, talk about this and more. The one and only Rick Laughland, he is the editor of Amazin Clubhouse, and he's also the editor of the Nets blog, both of which are a part of Maven and a part of Sports Illustrated. Rick.
And when we talked about March Madness, Michael, this is not what I had in mind. I didn't have in mind the fact that all of the major North American sporting leagues, professional leagues, college ranks are going to shut down. And I'll even say I killed the NBA during their China trip when they basically were supporting China, going against Hong Kong protesters, basically bowing down to the Chinese government that was oppressing a lot of those protesters. But as poorly as they looked in that situation, that going back to the China games at the start of the season, that's how much I have to applaud them for being basically proactive about this, being the first of the professional leagues to call it quits and to say, it's not worth it. Obviously, after Donovan Mitchell, who oddly enough has ties to the Mets, his dad, of course, works for the Mets. There's some concern now that, and there's been nothing reported, but potentially that he has to be tested. Donovan Mitchell's father, who of course has been in touch with the Mets organization, physically in touch with them, and potentially could infect some Mets players. So that's an ongoing concern for the team. But for me, for the NBA to basically take a stand and say, look, we want public health above everything and anything else, that to me was applaudable. And I think you saw the teams follow, the leagues, I should say, follow in suit, that being MLS, MLB, NHL, and so on. So for me, it's a really strange situation, being major sports fans as we are, Michael. The next couple of weeks or maybe even possibly a couple of months are going to be fascinating to see what each league and how they handle it, because just look at the NBA specifically. You had a situation with Vince Carter as a former Net player. He basically said his goodbyes to fans, thinking that this could be his final game of his entire career against the Knicks last night in a loss, in a game that ended so abruptly and without much fanfare. And for a guy that's been in the league for 2 decades, just such a strange ending and a strange feeling for basketball fans as they watch things unfold on TV. Games that were set to be played were postponed.
Yeah, and the whole thing was really bizarre last night. Getting word that all of a sudden the Jazz Thunder game was getting postponed, or that they were going back to the locker room, and that someone was ill. And you're thinking, is this coronavirus or something else? This is before we found out what was going on with Rudy Gobert. And then we find out that the NBA season, about an hour later, has been completely suspended. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. I think you texted me, actually, that the NBA season was suspended. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? This has got to be a joke. And then I checked Twitter, and then, of course, it was real, that the entire season has been suspended. And I don't even know. I don't think the NBA right now knows. They're trying to figure this out over the next. They have certainly enough time now to figure it out what they're going to do now moving forward. Obviously, the number one concern is everyone's health, and we got to make sure that everyone's healthy. They make sure that this disease is under control. I mean, the word now is that I heard that 58 members of the Jazz team had to be tested last night for coronavirus, and of course, as we found out, one other player tested positive for the disease. So who knows whether the players from other teams, other officials. There was concern that one of the officials that was doing the Sacramento Kings game last night was in contact with Rudy Gobert, and maybe he has it. So there's so much concern right now. The NBA has to make sure that this is cleared out first before they even go back onto the court. And that's why I have to sit there and think, well, what's going to happen if we have basketball again this year for this 2019-20 season? Do they start up where they left off with the rest of the season with, 16, 17 games left, and then go to the playoffs, or do they just go straight to the playoffs? When does this happen? We're going to sit here and talk about late April, May, June, July. To me, I think you also have to think about the next season as well, 2020, 2021. You don't want to have basically the end of the 1920 season go right up against the next season, which begins basically in September with training camps. So I think the NBA has to be very judicious on how they do this, bringing the NBA back when they do.
And this is a fascinating note that I found from Mark Cuban, they showed his reaction live on TV when basically word came down via Twitter. I mean, he almost fell out of his chair. He couldn't believe it. And he even said in his post-game press conference with reporters that he expects the NBA season to even drag on into August. And I see a whole host of issues with that. I think net fans would be happy about that, because you could be talking about Kevin Durant coming back this season. If the season comes back, drags on to August. And, all kidding aside, I know it's a serious situation, but nonetheless, I mean, you have the Tokyo Games, the Summer Games, of course, Olympics. That's yet to be determined what's going to happen with that. You have a baseball season that's postponed at least 2 weeks. You mentioned 17, 18 games left in an NBA season. Are they going to just basically call last night the end of the regular season and start the playoffs immediately as soon as it's deemed safe to do so? So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And the one fascinating thing I found was basically in a conference call with the NBA Board of Governors and the owners, and of course the one team, actually one of the only teams that wanted to basically go on business as usual and not postpone or not suspend the season, was James Dolan of the New York Knicks. I mean, can you just imagine that? It's not even like his team has any playoff seeding to worry about. Of course, what is he looking at? The bottom line, and not in the interest of fans and the world at large. So it's just unbelievable when that news came out about James Dolan. It's believable knowing him, but it's just another reason why Knicks fans just want him out.
You would think that James Dolan would want no fans in his arena, because all he does is get booed. People try to tell him to sell the team. So I mean,
yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't have to worry about security. He'll have no one in the building, but for that matter, he'll get his wish. But still, I mean, it's just unbelievable right now what's going on in sports. The other league, of course, the NHL, following the NBA, they have also suspended operations for the time being, at least 30 days. Same thing applies to the NBA, as I just said. And now Major League Baseball, very confusing what they're doing, Rick, because yes, it sounds like we're not going to have spring training games for the rest of this month, obviously. But to push the start of the season back 2 weeks, I sit here and I'm wondering, what does that even mean? Does that mean the schedule is going to stay the same, as in the Mets opening their season at home against Washington, but it's not going to happen, obviously, on March 26th, but it may happen on, as I look at the calendar here, April 13th? Is that what's going to happen? Or are we talking about just picking up right where the schedule is? I mean, it doesn't seem very clear to me what Major League Baseball is planning to do, because if you push it the whole season back 2 weeks, then we're talking about having a World Series into like Thanksgiving. I mean, that's crazy. So I just wonder what their plan is right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to guess, I mean, and Rob Manfred has had a hell of a month between the Houston Astros cheating scandal and now dealing with this. And we talked about it before the start of the call, Michael. I think the initial plan, so to speak, was to have the teams go back to their spring training facilities, being either in Arizona or Florida, and potentially starting the season there. But, after consulting, I guess, with a lot of doctors, scientists, the CDC, and the World Health Organization, there were concerns that if there were infected individuals that were introduced in those communities that didn't have any type of outbreak, that then you're spreading it there. So they kind of went back to the drawing board. And my guess would be they would basically start the season 20 games in. So wherever game 20 ends up being, if it's the Mets at the Arizona Diamondbacks, that would be where they would pick up. So
That's my
I don't think it's the perfect plan. Yeah, I don't think it's by any stretch the perfect plan, but certainly it's the best alternative they can come up with, because as you mentioned, I mean, if you start still trying to play 162 games and this season doesn't get underway till late April, early May, I mean, we've seen November baseball with the New York Yankees and Derek Jeter, Mr. November. I
right.
mean, it's entertaining and fun, but we've also seen snowstorms and bitter cold. And if you're a Met fan, maybe you don't have to worry about November baseball, but for
That's
baseball in the
guaranteed.
Northeast,
That's guaranteed
yeah, but
right now.
baseball in the Northeast. Baseball in the exactly. Baseball in the Northeast isn't exactly. They don't go hand in hand in November. That's for sure.
Yeah, either way, whether it's 140 games or 162 games, the Mets season ends in August when they're eliminated. What's the difference?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I guess you could say, and I mean this jokingly, of course. I guess the big winner is the Astros because now no one gets to boo them. I mean,
Exactly. I mean,
that,
they're probably, yeah, their PR people are finally taking a deep sigh of relief and saying, "Man, we're finally not the center of attention." But hopefully, like I said, for baseball fans and for everybody, hopefully within a couple weeks we can go right back to plunking Astros batters and basically having fans boo them off the field.
there you go. But it's weird right now. It really is weird that we're gonna sit here this weekend. There's no basketball on. There'll be no baseball games on, and that will be that way for the foreseeable future. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a whole month, maybe 2 months. We don't know. But it is going to be very surreal. When sports comes back, and it will come back, it will be the greatest day ever. I mean, it's almost right up there when baseball finally came back after 9/11. And everyone, obviously everyone talks about the Mets game that took place at Shea Stadium on that September 21st. But remember, baseball came back, I think, 3 or 4 days before that. The Mets were in Pittsburgh, and it was just kind of surreal to have sports finally back after what happened in 9/11. And that's what's probably it's gonna feel that way when everything comes back after this. I mean, you're gonna have, I would assume, and we don't know what they're gonna do, but I assume we're gonna have NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, wherever we are in the schedule in the baseball season. Bam, there we are, right there to kick it all off.
Yeah, and again, I mean, of course, that seems like a lifetime ago, only being 2001, about
Yeah.
19 going on 20 years, but it's going to have a similar feel. I mean, because, baseball fans and sports fans in general, you just take for granted having the ability to go see your favorite team any night. Of course, if you live in New York, or pop on the television and watch them, and the fact that that's being taken away now, and especially with all the fears and anxiety over this virus spreading, I mean, it's just a strange feeling, kind of like an end of the world type of feeling. But I think it's going to be short lived. I think that eventually we're going to pull out of this and eventually be back to some sense of normalcy.
We'll see. I hope that this gets under control. I hope that everyone can stay safe. Obviously, we all want to see everyone pull through this. We will, and soon enough we'll have sports back. Rick, last word with you.
And like I said, again, I mean, I would urge people, if they're not feeling well, if there's even any question,
Yeah.
I think there was a debate with the CDC now will provide free testing regardless of whether you have insurance or not. So it's better to be safe than sorry, because there are a lot of similarities between the common cold, the flu, and this coronavirus. And again, the more we can just make responsible decisions and not feeling well, not going to work, and all that kind of stuff, again, we're taking this as seriously as possible, because it has the potential to be a widespread issue for the whole United States to deal with. So hopefully, by taking these measures right now, that we're going to avoid this pandemic getting out of control. And this time next month, we could be talking about pretty much the end of the coronavirus and gearing up for what's going to happen with Luis Rojas and his Yoenis Cespedes is going to take the field, because frankly, I'd much rather be talking about that, as frustrating as it is with Yoenis Cespedes being off the field most of the time.
You could have Yoenis Cespedes back on the field and Kevin Durant back on the court, all within a couple of months. Who knew? That could be the other side of the bridge. That could be the other side of the rainbow here with this thing, if we get through this. But Rick, always fun to speak to you about sports. Obviously, this is not what we wanted to talk about today, but it is the world we live in 2020. It's been a very strange start to the year. let's stay well, my friend. Just keep washing your hands. Same thing over here, you know.
Yep.
All right, Rick. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Michael.